It's great to be here. I love this place, this building, and this is a great institution. And I really want to thank Bill and Sal for inviting me, and Lydia for reading with me, or allowing me to read with her, and also for her support of my translation in the past and present. And I confess that I'm a little nervous about reading fiction, because I normally read poetry and you don't have to contextualize, or I never contextualize what I'm reading, but I feel like maybe since I'm going to read an excerpt from a novel, I'll try and tell you a little bit about it, and I'll try and be succinct. So I'm going to read just one, to make it simple, one excerpt from this novel, The Jokers, by Albert Cossery. The French title is La violence et la dérision, which translates as violence and derision. And it was published in 1964, one of 8 novels by Albert Cossery, who was an Egyptian-born writer who lived in France for most of his adult life. And in fact, the last 40 years of that life, he lived in a single hotel room in Paris and kind of led the life of a flaneur. And writer, wrote 8 novels total. So this was somewhere in the middle, and this book is set, all of his novels were set in his native Egypt, although he only went there once after moving to France. And they tend to be very dark and satirical, funny, dark, satirical, and reflect his anarchist leanings. And this one particularly does so. So the story is, we're in a city, unnamed city, coastal Egyptian, probably Alexandria, and there's a new governor in town who's just appeared, and he is a complete buffoon and totally corrupt, and he's been taxed with this, with the task of removing all the rubbish from the streets, including the prostitutes and the cigarette butt collectors and the beggars. And when he tries to remove the beggars, it's really the last straw for the characters in this novel, because the beggars are what give, all these people are what give the city its kind of color. And so there are different factions trying to get rid of this governor. There's the militant, idealistic, violent, revolutionary faction, and then there's this other faction of kind of happy-go-lucky, delight-taking people who think that the best way to protest the corruption of the government is just to sort of make fun of them incessantly and kind of let them hang themselves by their ridiculousness. So in this scene, Haykal, who's the leader of that kind of band of merrymakers, is meeting for the first time a very wealthy businessman whom he's been wanting to meet for a long time. And it's reciprocal. The businessman's been wanting to meet Haykal for a long time because he admires his shenanigans. And this is how their conversation goes. The Globe was a pretentious cafe located on one of the most elegant streets of the European Quarter, not far from the Cliff Road. It was famous for its long stretch of open-air tables, before which passed a magnificent and unceasing parade of pretty girls. The majority of its customers, almost all in fact, spent their time lustfully sizing up the feminine figures that sauntered by. The thin dresses worn by these divine creatures made the men's task as easy as it was mesmerizing. Some customers of the cafe, not the youngest, would sit and wait all day just to see the perfect curve of a beautiful leg or the quivering mystery of an anonymous haunch. And in fact, the girls were as eager to display their charms as the men were to observe them. Some of them were even said to go without underwear, just for the mischievous pleasure of watching the unfortunate voyeurs overheat. So at the Globe, the outdoor tables were always full, except during the blistering midday hours, when it was customary for the young ladies to take their siesta. The inside of the cafe, however, was almost always empty, with the occasional exception of a pair of old codgers who, awaiting their departure for the sweet hereafter, played a lazy game of dominoes that would probably extend into the afterlife. Every now and then, roused to spite themselves by the whoops from outside, they'd cast a dull glance through the window onto the objects of so much lust. Then, faint with desire, they turned back to their senile game. Haykal approached the cafe. He walked confidently, slipping between tables and carefully guarding the virgin purity of his magnificent, freshly ironed suit. He was looking straight ahead and seemed to pay no attention to the people in his path. He wondered if Khaled Omar was already there and whether he would be recognized by him. Haykal wanted to gauge the intuition of his future friend and accomplice. It was a litmus test. Surely any truly intelligent man would recognize him immediately. It seemed impossible that Khaled Omar, if he was the man Haykal imagined him to be, would fail to notice his presence. Someone stood up in front of him as if to block his way. It was Khaled Omar, a short man holding out a fat, ring-laden hand. "What an honor to meet you." "The honor is all mine," responded Haykal. He pressed the businessman's hand. "Please sit," said Khaled Omar. Haykal sat. Khaled Omar remained standing for a few seconds, then sat as well. He gazed ecstatically at Haykal, as if at an enchanting vision. "Forgive me for making you wait," said Haykal. "Have you been here long?" Khaled Omar emerged from his reverie. 10 minutes if that, but it's nothing. I'm happy to see you. I recognized you right away." The waiter approached. A glass of whiskey and a small plate of lukum were already on the table. "What can I get for you, Bey?" asked the waiter, addressing Haykal. Haykal ordered a whiskey and the waiter left. Khaled Omar grabbed the plate of lukum and offered it to the young man. "Please help yourself." "No thanks," said Haykal. "Not right now." "Then forgive me for eating in front of you," said Khaled Omar. "I adore sweets of all kinds." He took a lukum and popped it into his mouth, then licked the traces of powdered sugar from his fingertips. Khaled Omar ate his lukum, bobbing his head and gazing rapturously at Haykal. "I recognized you right away." "I have to admit that pleases me," responded Haykal. "You were sure I would, weren't you?" "What makes you think so?" "Well, I thought it strange that you wanted to meet this way," said Khaled Omar. "I couldn't see why you'd want to make things difficult. Our friend Karim could easily have introduced us. But in any case, his description of you didn't steer me wrong. I don't mean that he described the way you look or your clothes. No, he spoke only of your ideas. And that was enough for me to recognize you." "So my ideas show on my face?" asked Haykal. "It's hard to explain. I saw you walking across the square, and I said to myself, that's him. You had the look of someone who knows more than everyone else." "I know 2 very simple things," Haykal said. "The rest is of no importance." "I wonder if they're the same 2 things I know myself." "I'm sure they are. It's why I'm here, and it's why we can speak frankly." "So tell me what the first thing is." "I'm listening." Khaled Omar hastily reknotted his tie and smoothed his well-groomed mustache with his fingers, as if whatever he was about to hear merited an impeccable appearance. There was a gleam of amusement in his eyes and a hint of anxiety on his face. "Number 1 is that the world we live in is governed by the most revolting bunch of crooks to ever defile the soil of this planet." "I couldn't agree more. And number 2? "Number 2 is that you must never take them seriously, for that is exactly what they want." "Agreed," said Khaled Omar, and burst into a long, resounding laugh. The laughter was contagious. As it spread to the surrounding tables, it grew even louder, outrageously loud. Khaled Omar turned from one neighbor to the next, winking as if to thank them for participating in his hilarity while encouraging their continued pursuit of such joyful delirium. Finally, he got hold of himself. The others, however, were still convulsed with the mirth he'd so inconsiderately unleashed. Haykal had been unmoved by the general hilarity. He remained seated, stiff and aloof, observing his new friend with satisfaction. He was utterly delighted with this jovial little pot-bellied man, with his gleaming pomaded mustache and strong smell of violet-scented perfume. How unusual, a man whose success hadn't corrupted him one bit. He acted just as he had when he'd gone barefoot and even slept in the street. His bizarre outfit was only a disguise. All the riches in the world would never tame the crude joy and artless affability of his every gesture. His big, mocking laugh was an outright defiance, launched in the face of power. "You see," Khaled continued, "there's all you need to know." "Yes," said Haykal, "but still, not enough people get it." Who cares? Don't tell me you're the kind who wants to make the world a better place. God, no, Haykal responded. I have no interest in bettering anything. There's nothing worse than a reformer. They're all careerists. I thought you'd say that, but I'm relieved to hear it, said Khaled Omar. I had the misfortune of encountering that kind in prison. They were no better than my jailers, so righteous and as full of themselves as pregnant women. They made prison such a depressing place. They're utterly tiresome, said Haykal with something close to hatred. All they want is to replace one government with another, ostensibly more just one. They all dream of becoming ministers. Ministers, can you imagine a filthier ambition? Please, I beg you, don't speak to me of those people. You're right. So listen, I want to be clear about why I'm here. I'm sure our friend Kareem has told you how destiny magically transformed me from a jailbird into a rich and respectable businessman. A beautiful story, very instructive, and I'll tell it to you someday in all its glorious detail, because I know you'll appreciate it. But the short version is I earned all my money in such a crazy, ridiculous fashion that my eyes were opened to the madness of the world. Now, I'd like to put this money to use in a way that isn't sensible or just. I'd like to make a contribution to the madness of the world. Do you understand? Perfectly. A cause that is neither sensible nor just. I couldn't put it better myself. It goes without saying that everything that is mine is yours. He placed a brotherly hand on Haykal's arm. I'm eager to know. What are your plans? Haykal remained silent. He wasn't surprised by the businessman's offer. It was just that something in his heart stirred whenever he was reminded of his ability to sway others. This man, whom he barely knew, had just offered him his fortune. What did he want in return for such extravagance? This illiterate businessman was a strange character indeed. What was it he'd said? To make a contribution to the madness of the world? Haykal was almost scared to find so much lucidity in such an unrefined mind. Had he just met his master? And what did Omar want from him? What untold delights did he hope would result from this mad pursuit to which he had just pledged his entire fortune? His entire fortune! That was more than Haykal had asked for. As if it cost a fortune to entertain yourself. All you had to do was look around. The spectacle was free. Khaled Omar lifted his hand. His rings flashed, and the waiter approached. Let's drink to our mutual understanding, said Haykal, raising the glass the waiter had set down on the table. Khaled Omar raised his own glass, and they toasted each other. The street was packed with evening strollers enjoying the cooler air at the end of the torrid day. There were the working stiffs, upright and formal, the dignified family men flanked by wives and children, the occasional pair of young newlyweds who clutched each other's hands in a grotesque show of commitment. But none of the drinkers of the globe paid any attention to this mundane procession. They weren't there to look at humanity in all its mediocrity. They were waiting for a luxuriantly curvaceous woman to show up and arouse their desire. From time to time, a metallic squeal, sharp and deafening as a siren, signaled the ambling approach of a tram. The drivers of horse carts, who were so skilled at maneuvering through traffic jams, lashed out at the indolent mob filling the street, impervious to anything but the welcome sea breeze. Haykal tried in vain to locate a single bum, a single happy-go-lucky derelict who had managed to escape the clutches of the police. Not one. Reduced to the contributing members of society, in other words, the depressed and overworked, the city's streets were becoming strangely sinister. Wherever you went, you were surrounded by public servants. Haykal couldn't help but remember how the beggar had responded to his invitation to come collect his monthly sum at the house. That a starving beggar would refuse to be seen as an employee. What an insult to posterity, which only recognizes those who make careers of following the rules. History's full of these little bureaucrats who rise to high positions because of their diligence and perseverance in a life of crime. It was a painful thought. The only glorious men the human race had produced were a bunch of miserable officials who cared about nothing but their own advancement, and were sometimes driven to massacre thousands of their own just to hold on to their jobs and keep food on the table. And this was who was held up for the respect and admiration of the crowd. Khaled Omar waved away a fly that had landed on the plate of Lukum and gave Haykal a look full of unspoken expectation. Why was his companion so silent? Why was he pretending to be so interested in what was going on in the street? Was he having second thoughts? Khalid Omar had long imagined this meeting, and he'd wondered whether Haykal would ask for his help right off. Haykal's silence made him think he was hesitating to reveal his plans. This lack of confidence pained Omar. Hadn't he just put all his earthly goods at Haykal's disposal? The young man's visible coldness, the elegance of his manners, his wary, sarcastic smile, none of this displeased Omar. They were the signs of an aristocratic mind. No, Khalid Omar admired Haykal without reservation. If only he'd deigned to take his fortune and accept his devotion. "Thank you for your generosity," said Haykal. "I will definitely need your help, but it won't cost a fortune, much less. Whatever it is, give me your orders. I'm at your service." Haykal crossed his legs and let his gaze stray over the passing crowd once more. Then he turned to Khalid Omar and said, "Well, I'm sure I don't need to tell you that the horror and stupidity of the current governor are completely beyond the pale. I know, and I also know that he's supported by a revolting clique of newspaper editors who can't stop singing his praises. That's not a bad thing. On the contrary, it'll make our task easier." "How?" "Very simple," said Haykal. "We're going to jump on the bandwagon. We too will sing the praises of our odious governor. We'll outdo them in their idiocy." I'll stop there.